Speaking philosophically, there are two types of people in this world. There are iced coffee people, and there are cold brew people, and very often you'll meet one of them that is incredibly passionate about why one is better than the other. But really, what's the difference between them? How do you even make these two coffee drinks? And the most important question of all, which one actually is better? Let's talk about it. So right off the bat, let me just say that I personally like both iced coffee and cold brew. I think that they're very different, but I think that they are both really enjoyable in the proper context, and of course, if they're made properly. So in this video, I'm going to show you simple and reliable recipes to make each one of them, and talk about what the differences are. So, to you might come away thinking, wow, iced coffee is way better than cold brew, or vice versa. I mean, it really depends on what you actually like, and it also depends on the kind of coffee that you use. So what I want to do today is highlight the difference between them by using a coffee that's probably, well, no, not probably, it is definitely way better suited to iced coffee, and I think that it's probably going to fall short as a cold brew coffee. But, I've been surprised before in front of the camera, so let's see what happens. The moment that I mention that I'm going to use a coffee that's better for one rather than the other, you're probably wondering, well, what is that coffee? Let me show you. It is a 100% Kona pea berry from, of course, Kona Earth. This stuff. Oh my gosh. I'm always shocked by how good this stuff smells. So, pea berries are a little dangerous to be having loose on a tabletop because pea berries are what are created when a coffee cherry only grows one bean rather than two. So you don't end up with this dual flat and round profile. You end up with a coffee bean that's almost completely round. And the benefit of it is not its shape, but rather its shape is indicative of its density. They're incredibly rare. They make up, 5% of any given harvest, and which makes a Kona pea berry one of the rarest coffees, if not the rarest coffee in the world. Especially a single estate coffee like this one, where you're buying directly from the farmer and not just from a conglomerate that might be sourcing beans from multiple places all over the island. The fact that they're rare is not just what makes them valuable, but actually they have a higher density than other coffee beans from the exact same harvest. Now, I'm not going to get scientific on you because, well, I'm not sure I completely understand all of it. Density relates to how much flavor potential there is inside of a coffee bean. The less dense it is, the less material there will be that can be converted through roasting into delicious flavor. The more density there is, the more material can be converted into flavor. So the amount of flavor per pound goes up as the density goes up. And this is a pretty universal thing across all types of coffee grown all over the world. But it's not just flavor concentration that's increased with your density, but also the flavor variety and complexity. And the reason I picked this today is because it's the most flavorful and the most complex flavored coffee that Kona Earth produces. So I know it's going to make a fantastic iced coffee, but I'm really curious to see how it's going to turn out with the cold brew because some of the subtlety in flavors can be lost through cold brew brewing. Is that cold brew brewing? It sounds silly. So I'm really curious to see what the cold brew coffee tastes like, and if cold brew making cold brew is actually a viable thing for such a high quality specialty coffee like this. So let's check it out. So this is the cold brew that we'll be trying today, and my, wasn't that fast. Of course, I made it in advance because cold brew takes 12 to 24 hours depending upon the recipe that you're using. The recipe that I used was for a ready to drink cold brew, not a concentrate, 81 grams of ground coffee per liter of water. I cut that in half so that I used 40.5 grams of coffee and 500 mils of water. Ground coarse like a French press, and actually I used a French press to brew this. Dump everything into the carafe and let it sit. After 24 hours, put the lid on, gave it a press, and poured it into this bottle. I then put it in the fridge and let it chill thoroughly. So this is ready to go, and again, it's not a concentrate, this is a ready to drink cold brew. So let's talk about the iced coffee I'm gonna make. This is essentially the exact same recipe from episode number 1 on how to make a pour over with only 2 slight variations, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Before we do, you might be wondering, is this really a fair comparison at all? I mean, this is a French press and this will be a pour over. Yes, I know this is cold brewed, but you're still gonna get that same flavor profile of huge texture and not a lot of flavor by comparison to the pour over when you use a metal filtered French press, just like this guy, because all the coffee oils, of course, are ending up in the final brew, whereas the paper filter over here strips them out. And to be honest, I realized that immediately after I put all of this into the carafe. And my solution Might seem a little bit funny, but I think it's gonna work great. I'm actually gonna use the AeroPress with its little paper filter to actually filter out part of this cold brew into a separate glass so that we can do a tasting of cold brew by itself, cold brew that has been paper filtered, and the iced coffee. And in that way, I think we'll get a pretty fair comparison. So let's make this iced coffee. Now, to make iced coffee, all you have to do is brew with your coffee as normal with only 2 tiny little tweaks. You grind your coffee just a tiny bit finer, and then you take your hot water and you split it up so that 2/3 are gonna brew as normal, and you put 1/3 as ice in the carafe, so that as the hot coffee is coming out of the cone of the brewer, it melts that ice, and by the time you're done brewing, all of the ice is melted and all of the heat has been absorbed out of the hot coffee, so you should end up with a coffee that is normal strength at the end, but is also room temperature instead of, you know, whatever it is when it comes out of the cone. So really, it's incredibly easy to do this. Let me show you. Giving a little spritz of water right on top of your beans before you grind them helps to keep the static from going. They say take time to stop and smell the roses, but I love to stop and smell the coffee. "18 grams of coffee in. Just a little finer than normal. So once you get to this point, you want to add 1/3 of your water to the carafe as ice. So I'm using 300 mils of water total, so I want 100 mils as ice, or 100 grams, which, by the way, a mil and a gram, they weigh the same. Just to make it easy. Well, that's a little bit much. Grab a piece out of there. There we go. 1 hundo. Let's make some coffee. So make sure when you do this that you don't put in your normal amount of water, because you've already used 1/3 of it. So in this case, I gotta make sure that I do 200, there we go, 200 mils instead of the full 300. And I say that because that's exactly what I was thinking right as I started to pour, right? What's my total, 300? No, not 300. Making sure that you get those little details right is very important. And you can see with this reduced amount of water that that finer grind size is very helpful for actually getting our brew time as long as we want. And you don't want to end up under 2 minutes for your brew, which it looks like we're going to be right at 2 minutes. So I could have ground a little bit finer, but I really didn't want to over extract it. I think that under extraction is probably a little bit preferable to over extraction. There we go, that's 2 minutes and just the last few drips. Let me get a few things set up and we'll be right back. Okay, so the iced coffee here is now cool to the touch and all the ice has been melted and it smells absolutely delicious. So let's get some ice into these cups. If any of you are worried that this might dilute the coffee by having too much ice in here, I just want to reassure you that the more ice you have in a drink, the more capacity that ice has to absorb heat. You see, heat is what melts the ice. If you have more ice, then the amount of heat that's in this gets absorbed by all of the ice, and the amount of ice that actually turns into liquid water is very, very small. It can be a little counterintuitive for some, but this is actually the right way to do it. I'll do the all natural here, and then we'll do the filtered one here, and then we'll do the iced coffee over here. So what am I waiting for? Let's do it. I'm actually curious, I want to look at that filter paper. Wow, look at that. I should say I have never done this experiment before, so my reactions are going to be, well, what they're gonna be. Let's see. Cheers. Whoa. That is the most interesting cold brew I've ever tried. Holy moly. Okay, so first of all, that has the most acidity of any cold brew I've ever tried, which is not saying much because cold brew typically has no acid to it, whatever. And it's really surprising because one of the hallmarks that I found of 100% Kona coffee is that it's incredibly balanced, which means it's also very, very forgiving. Unless you radically under extract it, it's not crazy acid forward. It just has the right amount of acid, the right amount of bitterness. I want to come up with a better way to describe it, but to me, it's like it's Goldilocks coffee. It's right there in the middle. But cold brew always tends to extract without that acid. It kind of tends to be just your core flavor and maybe some bitterness. But this, wow. I'm in shock. I thought this was going to be so different than what it actually tastes like. There's some like vegetal notes, like green tea, kind of grassiness, almost a matcha flavor to it. I have never done this before with Kona coffee. This is the best cold brew I've ever had in my life. Now I'm worried. Maybe the cold brew will be better. Maybe it's better. I don't know. Let me try the filtered cold brew. See, that doesn't seem better. It's more refreshing, I'll say that, because it has a thinner texture to it. It doesn't have that luscious kind of oily body that this does. It is a little bit more refreshing, but I actually think that the flavor profile is a little bit more muted. I don't think it's better. Wow, that is so interesting. This one, I was sure that the filtered cold brew would be way better than the regular cold brew, and it's not. It's just not better. It's different, and it's a little bit less rich, but I don't like that. Normally, I would think that that would be better and it would let the flavor shine through better, but it just doesn't. It just doesn't. This is better. This is way better than this one. Now I'm actually scared for the iced coffee because I was sure in advance that this one would be way better than the cold brew. I was all planning to tell you guys, don't make cold brew with specialty coffee, especially something like a single estate coffee that's, you know, direct farmer to you. It's just not worth it. It's not gonna really extract the flavor properly. I would say I have to eat my words, but I was only thinking I would say that. Let's try the iced coffee. Wow, now that just tastes like a completely different beverage. These two have the same kind of flavor to them. Again, better. But this one, that's really interesting. I think this one is diluting a little bit more because it was room temp, whereas this was actually cold. Shoot, I probably should have left this at room temperature when we did this. I'm gonna add some more. So this has all of those same kind of vegetal green tea flavors that this one has. It doesn't have the thickness of texture, which I actually really like here. I'm actually surprised. I think this one has a higher level of acidity than this one does. No, it doesn't. They're really about the same. It's just this one has a bit more texture to it. I'm actually blown away by this comparison. The way that the flavor is presenting in the cup is not exactly the same. I think this one has a richer flavor to it. It has more of the baking spice kind of flavors, more of the nuttiness, more richness in the low end kind of flavor, and definitely there's more bitterness coming through in a really, really pleasing way. This one is a bit top heavy in that regard. It's not like it's unbalanced at all. This is like, whatever I say, please interpret. This is delicious. They're all delicious, but this one tends to be a little bit brighter, a little bit less of the rich kind of nuttiness. And this one has so much more of those flavors that for the same amount of acidity and the same amount of that kind of grassy herb tea-like, you know, flavor component, I think that it comes through better here because it just doesn't have some of the bottom end that this one does. But lest you think that this one is not as good as this one, the texture is so enjoyable, and it still has so much flavor that it's really shocking because the amount of acidity with that flavor is just not what I was expecting. Yeah, see, this tastes more like coffee that's nice and cold, coffee that's chilled. It almost makes me think more like Americano. After you take a drink and you breathe, that's where you really taste some of those herb kind of vegetal flavors. Whereas with this one, it's right up front. It hits you the moment it comes into your mouth, and then the richness is more on the back end. It's so interesting because like I can taste that it's the same coffee, but it's radically different in how they interact with you as you're drinking it. So really, I would say the only one that's not really worth it is this one, because I think that taking all of the oil out of the cold brew just doesn't make it better. Yeah, it has, it's not bad, and it's kind of funny because this is the only one that's giving me kind of a chocolate note. So I won't say it's bad at all. It's just not my preference compared to this one or this one. I don't think that the extra step makes it better. I mean, it looks prettier. This one looks like the iced coffee, and this one does look a little bit dirty, a little bit murky from all of that oil and the fine particles. I don't think that this one really stands up to either one of these. So in the end, am I saying that cold brew and iced coffee are equal? No, actually, because this is one that you can make just like that. It takes you about, what, 5 minutes to heat up a kettle, grind the coffee, and make this, whereas this guy you gotta plan 24 hours in advance. But for a lot of people, the appeal of cold brew is that you can buy a pre-ground coffee and just dump it into a mason jar or something like that, and you'll end up with something that's pretty drinkable at the end. Whereas if you were to use that same pre-ground coffee, make a hot iced coffee out of it, it's probably gonna fall flat on its face. And I've heard plenty of people in the specialty community talk about how iced coffee is so vastly superior to cold brew, and it tastes oxidized and all that stuff. And you know what? Maybe to them it is just not worth drinking. But to me, I think that if you're using high quality coffee and good water, cold brew is awesome. Quite frankly. and again, I cannot overstate this. I did not think that I was going to like the unfiltered cold brew nearly as much as the iced coffee. And I not in my wildest dreams did I think it was going to taste that good. But whichever you prefer, whether planning in advance or making it in the moment, they're both delicious, and I guarantee they're going to be a hit the next time you have people over. But whatever you do, don't let anybody judge you for how you like to drink your coffee. Cheers.